What is going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully everyone's doing well out there. Today we're talking about quarterback and tight end rankings here for Week 16 fantasy football. Now, yes, it's the fantasy playoffs. Maybe you're still looking for flex rankings, kicker rankings, defense rankings. We have those as well. They're a member perk, so consider hitting that little blue join button right underneath the video. Now, just because the season is over doesn't mean it's too late to become a member. But becoming a member of the channel, you're going to get access to Discord, the most non-toxic Discord in the entire fantasy football industry. Plus, all off-season long, you're going to be getting bonus videos as well. Not to mention, in the off season, I like to drop random Zoom links where I just go out there and talk to the community. So if you've been thinking about it all year long and just haven't done it, now is the time to become a channel member. But let's go ahead and dive into some rankings. We're kicking off with quarterbacks. Number 1 this week, it's Josh Allen. And this one really shouldn't be a surprise, right? It's a matchup going up against the Los Angeles Chargers, a Chargers defense that made Aiden O'Connell look like Joe Montana last week. Josh Allen sitting at number 1. Number 2, it's Jalen Hurts, another great matchup going up against the New York Giants, and the Philadelphia Eagles are in full-fledged must-win mode to try to get back on track. I got Hurts at number 2. Number 3, it's Patrick Mahomes. I know he's been a disappointment. I'm doing quotation fingers. You can't see them, but he's still been a solid, viable fantasy quarterback. He just hasn't been next level like we've seen in years past. In a must-win game at home against the Raiders, I got Mahomes at 3. Number 4, it's Justin Fields. That rushing upside and a great matchup at home against the Arizona Cardinals. Gonna put him at number 4. Number 5, it's Dak Prescott. Sure was a disappointment last week, but now he heads down to Miami for a potential shootout. If Miami can find ways to exploit that Dallas defense like they were last week, we could be in store for big points, so Dak's still inside the top 5. But at number 5, number 6, it's Lamar Jackson, a tough matchup traveling on the road to San Francisco. But we're starting to see Lamar Jackson utilize more weapons in this offense. Isaiah Likely, Rashad Bateman to go along with Zay Flowers and Odell Beckham. I got Lamar at 6. Number 7, it's Brock Do-'em Dirty Purdy, maybe the NFL MVP. Not an easy matchup for him either going up against Baltimore, but I think we can all agree this San Francisco offense can pretty much score on everyone, and all of their top weapons are healthy, which means Brock Purdy's inside the top 10 at number 7. Number 8, it's Tua Tagovailoa, and it sounds like we're gonna have Tyreek Hill back this week, and that absolutely raises his ceiling once again. Now, the matchup isn't great going up against Dallas, but they're playing at home in Miami, and they play so much better at home, so Tua's at number 8. Number 9 is Jared Goff of the Lions going up against the Minnesota Vikings. It's easier to throw on Minnesota than it is to run on them, and Jared Goff is one of the more consistent quarterbacks in the NFL when it comes to multiple touchdown passes a week, so he's at number 9. Number 10, it's Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, on paper, his matchup isn't that bad going on the road to Chicago, but the Chicago defense has been playing a lot better here over the last month and a half of the season. But I actually expect Arizona to be trailing in this ballgame, and Kyler Murray having to throw all 4 quarters. Plus, that pass rush of Chicago is legit. That could also lead to the pocket breaking down, Kyler having to scramble, and more rushing yards than we've seen him get here over the last couple weeks, so I got him at number 10. Number 11, it's Matthew Stafford playing Thursday Night Football going up against the New Orleans Saints. This offense has finally been opened up, and it was really the return of Kyron Williams that made it happen. With a healthy Cooper Kupp, with a healthy Puka Nacua, and now sprinkling in some Demarcus Robinson, I got Matthew Stafford at number 11. Number 12, it's the Bake Show. Baker Mayfield had a huge week 15. Now he gets an even better matchup here in week 16 going up against Jacksonville, a team that's super hard to run on, but super easy to pass on. I got Baker inside the top 12 at number 12. 13, it's T-Law. Trevor Lawrence, he just lost another weapon in Zay Jones, but the matchup is great going up against Tampa Bay. He still has playmakers in this offense as well, with Calvin Ridley, Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne, and maybe we'll even see another big play from Jamal Agnew. I still got Trevor Lawrence at number 13. 14 is Joe Flacco in a matchup going up against Houston, not a bad matchup, and Air Flacco out there throwing the ball over 40 times a game, so he's at 14. 15 is Jake Browning. I had to drop him a couple spots. Anytime you lose your number 1 wide receiver, it does impact the offense. He's not going to have Jamar Chase, and he's going to be on the road in Pittsburgh. The last time the Bengals played the Pittsburgh Steelers, they lost, and it was Jake Browning's first start. He's looking for redemption, and I still got him at number 15. 16, it's Nick Mullins of the Minnesota Vikings in a matchup going up against Detroit. Much easier to throw on Detroit, and we saw Nick Mullins throw the ball quite a bit last week. Now, even though he played fairly decently last week, I don't know if I want to rest my fantasy playoff chances on Nick Mullins, so I've dropped him down to 16. 17, it's Russell Wilson going up against the New England Patriots. At least this game's at home for Russ. The problem is There's not a whole lot of touchdowns to go around, and even though it keeps his floor safe right around 15 points or so, his ceiling not overly high, so I got him at 17. 18, it's Jordan Love. I had to drop him down not only due to the matchup going up against Carolina. They are one of the best defenses in the league against opposing quarterbacks, but we also know that Jayden Reed is questionable to play. He's arguably been the best piece of this passing offense for multiple weeks. That hurts. Jordan Love's at 18. 19, it's Gardner Minshew in a matchup going up against Atlanta. Not the easiest of matchups, but it does sound like he's going to have Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman at his disposal here this week. Pittman took that vicious hit in week 15, but he's already back on the practice field, which is a good sign, so Minshew's at 19. 20 is Sam Howell, and probably the lowest I've ranked him since the start of the season, but this matchup absolutely sucks going up against the Jets, and what really worries me here is kind of what we saw last week. They brought in Jacoby Brissett at one point. The Commanders have absolutely nothing to play for, and who's to say that we don't see more Jacoby Brissett here in the last couple weeks so they can see what they have with him. For that reason, in this matchup, I got Howell down at 20. 21 is Geno Smith, and a lot of the same things can be said for Geno Smith. The matchup isn't horrible going up against Tennessee, but is it going to be Geno? Is it going to be Drew Lock? Can either one of them be relied upon for all 4 quarters? If Geno starts and struggles, I can see them going back to Lock. If Lock starts and struggles, I can see them turning it back over to Geno. And for that reason, I'm worried, got him at 21. 22, it's Derek Carr, New Orleans Saints Thursday Night Football, going up against the Los Angeles Rams. The biggest issue with Derek Carr is inconsistencies. He can have a great week, and the next week it looks like he's never played quarterback before. Due to that, he's dropped down to 22. 23, it's Tommy DeVito of the New York Giants. A great matchup for opposing quarterbacks going up against Philly. But on the road, in Philly, when Philly needs to win this ballgame, I have some concerns, so Tommy DeVito's dropped down to 23. And then 24 is Taylor Heinicke. Once again, the starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons after they benched Desmond Ridder, yes, yet again, in a decent matchup going up against Indianapolis, but with the way that Arthur Smith calls plays, there's not much of a ceiling, so he's down here at 24. Which will then bring us to the end of the quarterback rankings, but the show isn't over. Now it's time to talk about tight ends, the football kind, and we're throwing it over to Kyle.
Yo, what's up, Headliner Nation? For the tight end position, if you're heading towards your fantasy championship and you're still alive in the playoffs, I would be willing to bet you probably have one of the more productive tight ends in fantasy football right now. And week 16 is actually setting up really well for those tight ends that are at the top of the leaderboard. We have some fantastic matchups this week, so if you're looking for some high upside play from one of the high upside tight ends, this is the week that you absolutely could end up getting it. Let's go ahead and hop right into it. Of course, Travis Kelce will end up being at number 1, but how will the tight ends stack up after that? Travis Kelce at number 1 against Las Vegas, and the Raiders are right in the middle of the pack when it comes to defending tight ends. And maybe Travis Kelce doesn't give you the upside that we've seen from him before, but he still has one of the safest floors in all of football for the tight end position, and he's going to be a guy that if we put in our lineup, we know what we're getting from him on a weekly basis. Anything over the top is just cherry on top of the sundae. Trey McBride going up against Chicago at number 2, Chicago allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the tight end position. That is absolutely a matchup that we're going to be locking in, that quite honestly will probably stay in a neutral game script for Arizona for a majority of the day, allowing them to throw, and Trey McBride should be the number 1 target. TJ Hockenson going up against the Detroit Lions. Now, the Detroit Lions also right in the middle of the pack when it comes to defending tight ends. We know their secondary has had some issues as of recent, but keep an eye on CJ Gardner-Johnson potentially starting this week at safety. If he does, he's probably going to see some matchups with TJ Hockenson. That could be good for TJ Hockenson if CJ Gardner-Johnson is still limited, or it could end up being bad if CJ Gardner-Johnson is on top of his game. But more than likely, Minnesota and Detroit will be throwing the ball more than enough to get him the fantasy points that we need. And honestly, going up against his former Detroit Lions, who are trying to win the NFC North, would not be surprised if TJ Hockenson looks for a little revenge game. David Njoku at number 4 going up against Houston, the team that is allowing the 6th most fantasy points to the tight end position right now. And David Njoku has been on absolute fire as of recent, a top 5 tight end each of the last 2 weeks. Joe Flacco loves him some David Njoku, and so do our fantasy lineups. Sam Laporta going up against Minnesota at number 5. Now, Minnesota, much better against tight ends than what Detroit is, but still kind of in the middle of the pack. So not an awful matchup by any means for Sam Laporta. And I wouldn't be surprised if he is utilized quite heavily as Detroit says, hey, look what we've got, a shiny new weapon here. But you know what? Detroit really doesn't play that game. They don't care who gets the passing attempts. They don't care who gets the targets. They don't care who gets the rushing attempts. They don't care who gets the tackles. They're just going to put together a well-balanced game plan. So does Sam Laporta have top 5 upside? Absolutely. But he also has a floor that's a little bit lower than some of the guys after him. Evan Ingram at number 6 going up against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the tight end position. No Zay Jones, no Christian Kirk, lots of targets for Evan Ingram. Jake Ferguson at number 7, and this is the type of matchup that will absolutely allow Jake Ferguson to reach his ceiling, especially if Miami can play out in front of Dallas. More than likely, regardless though, Dallas is going to be throwing the football all over the place in this matchup. And for Jake Ferguson, when you take a look at what he's done over the last couple of weeks, the target share has been there, but the statistics have not. I think we're going to find some more of those stats this week and those fantasy points. George Kittle's got a tough matchup going up against Baltimore. On Monday Night Football, this is going to be one of the best matchups of the week, and Isaiah Likely at number 9 is right behind him. And just like George Kittle, it's not going to be an easy matchup for either of these guys. I'm definitely excited to see what they can bring to the table. Both of these defenses are in the top 10 of fewest fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. But Isaiah Likely has been an absolute superstar the last couple of weeks at the tight end position, based on tight end standards, and is filled in nicely for Mark Andrews. Expect Lamar Jackson to continue to lean on him. And George Kittle, he's either going to give you a performance that's going to be outside the top 15 tight ends, or he's going to give you a performance that's up near the top 5. For me, I just like the floor a little bit better of some of these guys in front of George Kittle this week because of their matchups, so I'm going to go ahead and move him down in the rankings. Hunter Henry at number 10 is still dealing with a knee issue right now, and as of this recording, had not practiced as of yet. So continue to keep an eye on Hunter Henry this week going up against Denver that just got smashed by Sam Laporta and gives up the most fantasy points to the tight end position this season. If Hunter Henry does not play for some reason, then let's go ahead and take a look at Mike Gesicki to potentially have a decent day. Darren Waller doesn't have a ton of upside for me this week, but going up against a Philadelphia secondary that has been banged up and has been hit hard this season, I expect Darren Waller to have a decent floor, something like we saw last week. If we can get him 6 targets, 4 receptions, 40 to 50 receiving yards, hopefully we can get him in that point range just inside the top 12. And if he scores a touchdown, we can lock him inside the top 12. And then Pat Freiermuth going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals team allowing the 2nd most fantasy points to the tight end position this season. For the Muth, hopefully Mason Rudolph can get him the football. This is the type of matchup that he needs. And I'm not going to go too high with him because I don't trust Mason Rudolph. But quite honestly, I also could see Pat Freiermuth, anybody ranking him up at tight end 10 as well. These 3 guys, kind of interchangeable in my opinion. The Muth might have the highest upside, but I don't trust Mason Rudolph. Hunter Henry, he's banged up, but I love the upside against Denver. And Darren Waller, don't love the upside, but I love the floor. Being cautious with Cole Kmet this week because Arizona does allow the 4th fewest fantasy points to the tight end position. And because of that, I am just a little weary that Cole Kmet is going to have the upside that we would need to go inside the top 12. I just like the upside of a lot of the guys in front of him right now. Right here this week, this is the Taysom Hill line. This is dubbed the line where we look at guys above Taysom Hill as being reliable tight ends that have a really nice ceiling. But anyone below Taysom Hill, they're just as much of risk as he is. This week, Taysom Hill, he's a little bit lower. The Taysom Hill line is lower due to so many good matchups. Dallas Goedert at number 15. 4 catches for 40 yards each of the last 2 weeks. Doesn't have that much of a ceiling, and I'm not 100% convinced he's 100% healthy. Dalton Kincaid at number 16 has kind of disappeared the last 2 weeks. That might have something to do with Dawson Knox being healthy, and might have something to do with the change in the game plan for the Buffalo Bills, and it might just have something to do with the fact that, I don't know, the Buffalo Bills, they've just been up and down and using their talent all season long. Look at James Cook. Didn't want to use him to begin the season, and now all of a sudden he's a fantasy superstar. But Stephon Diggs also hasn't been doing anything for us recently either. Dalton Kincaid, who knows? Maybe they finally get him back on track against the Chargers this week. The Chargers have allowed some chunk games to the tight end position this season, so it is feasible that he could do something. but I just don't trust that offense right now outside of Cook. Dalton Schultz has a really bad matchup against Cleveland this week, plus he's missing his starting quarterback, so it's hard for me to go a lot higher than that. And Cade Otton for me at number 18 going up against Jacksonville has a great matchup this week. Jacksonville allows the 4th most fantasy points to the tight end position, but Baker Mayfield just doesn't look his way. So a lot of the guys here at the end have potential, right? It's just risky potential that doesn't go over any of the guys in front of them. All right, who are the guys on the outside looking in right now? Tucker Kraft has looked really good as of recent, but he's got a tough matchup against Carolina this week. You really have to hope for a touchdown there. Kyle Pitts, I'm leaving outside my 18 this week. The guy just isn't consistent enough. Going up against Indianapolis, maybe there's an opportunity for him to find the end zone, but once again, if you put him in your lineup, you're either going to get 4 points or 14 points. Tanner Hudson's the one option here out of this group that I wouldn't mind you rolling with, especially in like a full PPR league. Am I super excited about it? No. Going up against Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh does do a decent job at times at limiting tight ends, and because of that, I don't know if I'm super excited to try and roll Tanner Hudson out, who's been up and down. No Jamar Chase could absolutely help that, but you have to keep in mind that no Jamar Chase doesn't necessarily mean things go to Tanner Hudson, because you still have Tyler Boyd. Chigioco going up against Seattle. We've seen a little bit of an uptick in usage for him as of recent. Now, the upside hasn't been there for him, but he is averaging about 13 yards per reception over his last 4 games. Gerald Everett at number 23 going up against Buffalo. With everybody being banged up, Gerald Everett absolutely has an opportunity to help out this week. But Buffalo is one of the best teams in the NFL, averaging barely 10 fantasy points per game to the tight end position. So for Gerald Everett going up against Buffalo and having a backup quarterback, not super excited about it. And then Logan Thomas against the New York Jets. More than likely, he's going to give you 6 fantasy points this week, and you're going to go, man, why didn't I find somebody with more upside? Well, Headliner Nation, there you have it. Hopefully that breakdown right there of my rankings for week 16 will help you set your lineups and get the right tight end in the position that you need. I'm definitely getting fired for that. But anyway, Headliner Nation, peace out, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you, hopefully, on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.